Okay, so we're back, and we've spent some time cleaning up all these pieces and parts, getting all that old grease out of the equation as much as possible. We've cleaned up the inside of the main housing of the reel here. It had quite a bit of old grease built up in here, and it just kind of turns into like a wax, as I would call it. Same thing on all the gear teeth and stuff. It hardens up, and it just makes it very difficult to to turn after a while. You can actually see there's like some small chunks of old grease right here. So that was definitely contributing to the problem of it not turning. Another problem, however, was this main bearing. This main bearing would not turn at all. And so what I did is I stopped for a moment and actually serviced this bearing. I took the top plate off. There's a retainer ring on the top, and then take the plate off. And then I had to spray some WD-40 in there for a while. That wasn't cutting it loose. And then I tried some PB Blaster, and that really started to loosen it up. And then clean it up with a toothbrush. Now, I did all this on a separate video. You can check it out on the YouTube channel, and I have other videos on the same topic because it's a very common problem. You can see it's a clean bearing, but it was completely fused and stuck because that old lubricant, that was in there just hardened up, and that's it. It just, it froze up basically, so it had to be freed. And so that also most certainly had, that played a role in, the reel not, turning. Okay, so let's get back into it here, and let's put this all back together. So we're going to start here with our pinion gear. We've cleaned it up. We're going to take some blue grease to the gear itself right here. Hopefully when this reel goes back together, it'll be in much better shape. All right, now you want to make note of the orientation of all these parts and make sure that they all go back in exactly the way that they came off. All right, so we've got a washer, and then there's like this really thin shim that goes on. And then we've got our collar. And then there's this really thin brass shim that goes on top of that collar. Okay, now before we go any further, what I like to do here is I like to take a little bit of reel oil and just put a little bit of that here on this collar, all right, and that's going to help lube the roller bearing here. Okay, now it's kind of hard to see, and I don't want to lose these, all right, but you can see that those rollers are in there. Okay, but the way that this works is this rests in here, and then this goes over the collar like so. Okay, and it should spin freely, and if it doesn't, well then something is amiss basically in there. All right, now we've got this brass ring here, washer. All right, and we've cleaned up in this housing here the best that we can. Now we'll save the bearing for last, but we want to get these pieces back in place first. Okay, and before you get too far along here, you need to not forget your spring. You've got a tension spring here. And the way that this is designed to work, it's really difficult to demonstrate this on camera, but it's designed to work where it sticks into here, this plastic spike, right? And then it pushes up against the housing in that slot right there. Okay, so you have to kind of work it as one piece and do it all kind of at the same time without losing, your spring. Okay, so you're going to have that spring in this position. You're just going to gently push that down into place as you're pushing the rest of this assembly down, like so. Okay, so it should look like this at the end. It's kind of hard to see, All right, but that spring rests in there when all this is compressed all the way down. Okay, now you can put your bearing back into position here on top, like so. All right, and then I also just like to just do a little bit of oil here on top of that, just for good measure. Don't overdo it. Okay, then our plate goes back on. And again, you want to make note of that orientation of the way that this went on. I'm pretty sure it was this way. All right, so it should be like that. And then you can put these screws back in position one by one. Don't over tighten these either because it will crack. The housing of the reel is primarily made of a harder plastic, and it will get brittle, of course, over time. So you just want to make sure you don't over tighten any of these things. Okay, so you should have something that ends up looking like that. And this is moving real smoothly. Okay, now we're going to have a quick look at our rotor here and inspect it. You know, it's all very, very clean. You know, there's nothing really that has to happen here. You know, we're just going to do a little bit of real oil here on this lever. It goes up and down like that. Okay, and then maybe just a little bit of oil here on the seams. You know, but it's moving quite well, so there's no problems there. All right, and we're going to put this back on. And get that rotor nut back in position. 10 mil nut. Yeah, you can see some of that old grease that was on there though, and you know that's a typical thing. So it proves a point that, you know, good reel maintenance is key, you know, for good operation of your reel. Okay, and then we've got this set screw here, and they've given you 3 different holes to choose from. It doesn't really matter which one you go into, as long as you can get into one of them. Okay. Now we've cleaned up our main shaft and all these parts here, main gear and crosswind gear and crosswind block. Okay, we're going to start with the crosswind block here. We're going to take a little bit of blue grease here to the inside of the housing here. Okay, it also doesn't hurt just to apply a little bead of oil here at the base of the anti-reverse and also up here as well. Okay, just to help work that. And make note that there is a V-spring right here, and it will fly out on you. I've had it happen to me a few times, and so you want to keep your thumb over that if you're going to choose to exercise this. Okay, now this is also key. You need to make sure that the anti-reverse lever is in this position in opposed to that position. All right, it needs to be flush going straight up and down where this notch is here. Okay, because you need the clearance, okay, in order to get the main gear back into position. All right, now we've taken the 4.0 steel wool to this surface here on the main shaft, and it's nice and smooth and clean. I'll go back with that blue grease like so. And we're going to start that and just get it ready. And while we're waiting, we're going to put a little blue grease on the crosswind gear, both top and bottom, gear teeth. like so. And we're going to set that down in the base there, like that. Okay, we've also cleaned up our block. And we're going to get a little bit of blue grease on that as well. Like that. Okay. And we're going to rest that down into position here. Okay, so you should have something that looks like that. All right, now for the finishing part of this section of the reel, we need to get some blue grease here on these main gear teeth. We've cleaned these out with a brass wire brush. Get all that old hardened grease out of there. And we're replacing it with some fresh grease. Makes for good operation. Okay. And then this is the part where it's a little bit of a multi-juggling act, all right? But you want to set the main gear down in position so that it meshes with the pinion gear and the crosswind gear. And then you can push down on that main shaft, okay? Line up your holes down here at the base. Take 1 drop of oil to that hole there. And then you've got your set screw, which I have right here. Okay, and you want to take that small screwdriver and put the set screw back in. And try not to drop it in there like I just did. This is a common problem with these little set screws. They're hard to get a hold of sometimes. And we're going to spin those threads back up. I really like using the oil on those threads because I have snapped these off before. It does have a tendency to happen sometimes. Okay, now we can put our side plate back on. This bearing is turning nice and freely. We did hit it with a little bit of WD-40. There's no need to really take it out though. The WD-40 will work its way in. However, just for good measure, we'll take a little bit of real oil to the top of it, and that'll also work its way in the little seams around the shield there. It'll find its way in there. And then we're also going to just do a light film of grease here as well on the shaft, just a little bit. You don't want to overdo it. Okay. And we'll set this back in like so. Got our 3 screws for the side plate. So as you can see, this reel is not too hard to work on. You just need a little time, a little patience, some basic tools, and it can be done. So, if you have this reel, or if you're thinking of picking up this reel, you can watch this video and understand how this, process works. And this is also pretty much the same for the others of this series. Everything from the ultralight to the ultralight might have a couple of things that are a little different, but the size 1, 2, 3, 4, they all pretty much work pretty much like this one does. So you can utilize that information to your advantage if you have any of those reels in the series. The ultralight is a little different, I believe, internally, the way that it has to go together. It has pretty much all the same parts. It's just a little bit of a different sequence of putting stuff together, I believe. I haven't worked on that one in a long time now. Okay, so we've got our shield. We're just gonna clean off this oil and grease and stuff here real quick off the base of this and slap that back on, the protective cap and screw. Okay, and don't forget your clicker ratchet wheel here, and also spacer washer goes on top like that. And then before we continue, I'm just going to dry this off a little bit because it's getting a little messy. We want to look at our drag stack and spool. So underneath, a little bit of real oil here. Okay, the spool's nice and clean as it should be. All right, and then we've got our drag stack. All right, so we've got a drag washer, metal washer. We got that capture, and then we've got this ring that goes on top of that, and then we've got our snap ring. And the snap ring basically just holds all those pieces together inside there. And you just want to make sure that it's secure when you put it in. There we go. Okay, so it should look something like that. And then we're going to go back on with the spool and the drag stack. Put our top cap back on. Okay, and then last but not least, I like to do just a little bit of oil here on that pivot, as well as just a little bit right here on the knob for that shaft. Okay, and then it doesn't hurt just to put a little bit of blue grease here on this handle shaft. Slide that back in like that. And then just a little bit of real oil on these threads. And we're going to tighten that up. Spins now. Quite a bit better. Anti-reverse is good. Make sure the bail's firing good. It sure is. And then we've got good drag. Tighten it up here. Yeah, nice and smooth. Don't forget to back it off when you're done using the reel after the fishing trip. That'll preserve the life of your drag stack. So there you have it. That is the Abu Garcia Cardinal Premier #2, all serviced up and ready to go. And thanks again for watching. This is Tony with Back on the Bench. If you liked the video, please do give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more, please make sure you do subscribe. Hit the notification button. That way you will be getting all the updates as to when I have new videos being posted, and there's going to be quite a few more coming out here shortly, so stay tuned for those, and we'll see you next time.